My name is Sarah Hale. I'm 28. 3 weeks ago at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, I stood in my parents' driveway watching a real estate agent hammer a "sold" sign into the lawn of my grandfather's house, while my mother counted cash in the front seat of her Mercedes, and my father told me, "Stop being dramatic, Sarah. He was just an old man who fixed radios. Nobody cares." The house sold for $340,000. They pocketed it in 11 days. I got nothing. Not his Purple Heart, not his dog tags, not even the radio he taught me to repair when I was 7. "You always make everything about you," my brother Derek said, leaning against his truck with his arms crossed. He was 31, worked in insurance, and had visited Grandpa Thomas exactly twice in 5 years. "Mom and Dad handled everything while you were off playing soldier. You don't get to show up now and act like you're the victim." My hands shook. I was still in my dress blues from the emergency leave request I'd filed to get home. "I was stationed in Okinawa. I came back the second I heard he was in hospice. Where were you?" "Supporting our parents," Derek said, "like family does." My mother rolled down the window. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. "Sarah, honey, your grandfather wouldn't want us fighting. He was a simple man. This house was falling apart. We did him a favor by handling it quickly before it became a burden." Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. I stared at the sold sign. The house wasn't falling apart. I'd spent my last leave repairing the porch steps, replacing the kitchen faucet, painting the shutters navy blue because that was Grandpa's favorite color. He died 6 days ago. They listed it 4 days ago. The ink on the death certificate was still wet. "You sold his house before his funeral," I said quietly. "The market was good," my father said, stepping between me and the car like I was the threat. "We're not obligated to explain our financial decisions to you, Sarah. You're not even in the will. Thomas left everything to us. That's final." Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, colder than that. "Did he? Leave everything to you?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't start with conspiracy theories. You always do this. You make up stories to justify your resentment." That phrase. "You make up stories." She'd been saying it since I was 14. When I told her Derek had cheated on his college entrance exam and I'd seen the tutor writing his essays. "You make up stories." When I said Dad had promised to pay for my state school tuition and then spent it on a boat. "You make up stories." When I told them Grandpa Thomas had asked for them during his last week and they never came. "You make up stories, Sarah, you always have." Let me take you back 15 years to when I was 13 and Grandpa Thomas taught me what silence sounds like. It was July, late afternoon, and the cicadas were screaming so loud you could feel them in your teeth. Grandpa's workshop smelled like motor oil and pine wood and the mint tea he always drank from a chipped navy mug. He was 72 then, still strong enough to carry me on his shoulders, even though I pretended I was too old for it. "Hand me the needle-nose pliers, Scout," he said. That's what he called me, Scout. Because I asked too many questions. I passed him the tool and watched him repair a transistor radio that someone had brought in from 3 towns over. His hands never shook. Every movement was precise. "Grandpa," I said, "why do people pay you in cornbread and firewood instead of money?" He smiled. The lines around his eyes deepened. "Because that's what they have, Scout. And because I don't fix radios for money. I fix them so people can hear their loved ones' voices across the distance." He set down the radio and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to remember it. Can you do that?" I nodded. The loudest people in the room are rarely the most important. The most important people are the ones who show up quietly and do the work nobody sees. You understand? I didn't. Not then. But I said yes anyway because Grandpa Thomas never wasted words. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a silver ring on a chain. It was thick, military style with an engraving I couldn't read. "When I'm gone, Scout, someone's going to try to tell you I didn't matter, that I was just a guy who fixed radios in a nowhere town. When that happens, I need you to remember this. The truth doesn't need an audience, it just needs one person brave enough to look for it." I touched the ring. It was warm from his skin. Why would anyone say you didn't matter? Because it's easier than admitting they didn't pay attention. Now, standing in that driveway 3 weeks ago, I understood. The funeral was on Saturday. 14 people came. Grandpa Thomas had lived in this town for 47 years, had repaired radios and appliances for half the county, had coached Little League and volunteered at the Veteran Center every Thursday. 14 people came. My parents sat in the front row wearing black and appropriate expressions of grief. Derek checked his phone 6 times during the service. My mother cried delicately into a handkerchief during the eulogy, which my father had written and which mentioned Grandpa's simple life and modest contributions 3 times each. I wore my dress blues and stood at attention by the casket. I was the only person in military uniform. Grandpa had served 22 years in the Navy. The funeral home didn't even put out a flag. After the service, a woman in her 70s approached me. She had kind eyes and a veteran center badge pinned to her cardigan. "You're Sarah," she said. "Thomas talked about you. You're the Marine." "Yes, ma'am." She glanced at my parents, who were accepting condolences near the door. "Did they tell you about the letters?" My stomach dropped. "What letters?" "The ones your grandfather wrote to the Navy Historical Foundation. He'd been corresponding with them for 8 years. They were trying to verify some of his service records for an archive project." She paused. "He asked me not to mention it to your family, said they wouldn't understand." "What was he verifying?" "I don't know the details, but the last letter he got about 2 months ago, he read it and cried. Happy crying, I think. He said, 'They finally found the file.'" She pressed a business card into my hand. "If you want to know more, call this number. Ask for Colonel Patricia Hayes. She was handling his case." I pocketed the card. My mother was watching us from across the room. The woman squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather was proud of you. He said you were the only one who inherited his stubbornness." That week, I went back to base. I couldn't look at my parents, couldn't listen to my mother talk about how peaceful Grandpa had looked, how ready he'd been to go, how they'd done everything possible to make him comfortable. My commanding officer approved 2 weeks of bereavement leave. I spent the first 3 days in my barracks room staring at Colonel Hayes's business card. On the 4th day, I called. "Colonel Hayes, Navy Historical Foundation." "Ma'am, my name is Lieutenant Sarah Hale. I'm calling about my grandfather, Thomas Hale. I was told you were working with him on some kind of archive project." There was a long pause. "Lieutenant Hale, I'm very sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a remarkable man. Can you tell me what you were verifying?" Another pause. "That information is part of a classified review process. I can tell you that your grandfather's service records from 1968 to 1971 were incomplete. He'd been trying to have certain commendations recognized, but the original documentation was lost in a fire at the records facility in 1973. My throat was dry. "What kind of commendations?" "I can't discuss specifics over the phone. But, Lieutenant, if you're interested in pursuing this, you should know that your grandfather filed a formal request that all information be released to you and only you in the event of his death. There's a packet waiting here in D.C. You'd need to come in person with your military ID and proof of relation." I booked a flight that night. The Navy Historical Foundation occupied 3 floors of an unassuming building in Washington. Colonel Hayes met me in a small conference room with a manila folder that was at least 4 inches thick. "Before I show you this," she said, "I need you to understand something. Your grandfather specifically requested that this information not be shared with his son or daughter-in-law. Only you. He was very clear about that. Do you know why?" "No, ma'am." "He said they'd already decided who he was. and no amount of documentation would change their minds. But you, he said, would want to know the truth. She opened the folder. Your grandfather wasn't just a radio man, Lieutenant Hale. From 1968 to 1971, Chief Petty Officer Thomas Hale was assigned to SEAL Team 1. The room tilted. He ran 17 reconnaissance missions in Vietnam. 12 of them are still partially classified. He pulled 8 men out of a firebase under direct fire and held a position for 6 hours until air support arrived. He was recommended for the Navy Cross twice. She slid a photograph across the table. It was Grandpa Thomas, maybe 30 years old, wearing combat gear I'd never seen, standing with a group of hard-faced men in front of a helicopter. Why didn't he tell anyone? My voice cracked. He did. He tried. The problem was, the paperwork was lost, and without documentation, the Navy couldn't officially recognize his service. For 40 years, your grandfather fought to get his records restored. Not for glory. He didn't want parades. He wanted one thing. She pulled out another document. He wanted his granddaughter to know that silence isn't the same as insignificance. I read the paper. It was a handwritten letter to Colonel Hayes, dated 8 months before his death. If I don't make it to the end of this process, please make sure Scout sees the file. Her family will tell her I was nothing. I need her to know that's not true. Not for my ego, for hers. She needs to know that coming from nothing doesn't mean you are nothing. I sat in that conference room and cried for 20 minutes. When I got back to base, I filed for extended personal leave and drove home. Not to my apartment. Home. To the town where Grandpa had lived. The house was already empty. The new owners were doing renovations. I walked past it twice before I could make myself stop looking. I got a job at the Veteran Center where Grandpa had volunteered. The work was simple: filing paperwork, organizing events, helping older vets navigate VA benefits. The pay was $32,000 a year. I'd been making $54,000 as a lieutenant. I didn't care. My mother called me twice in the first month, both times to tell me I was wasting my potential and dishonoring Grandpa's memory by throwing away my career. He'd want you to move on, she said during the second call. Stop wallowing in grief, Sarah. It's been 6 weeks. Did you know he was a SEAL? I asked. What? Grandpa Thomas. Did you know he was a Navy SEAL? That he ran combat missions in Vietnam? She laughed. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. Oh, Sarah, not this again. Your grandfather told a lot of stories. He was old. He got confused. I have his service records. Forged, probably, or exaggerated. You know how veterans are. They embellish. Her voice turned cold. You need to stop making him into something he wasn't. He was a radio repairman who never left that town, that's all. Accept it and move on. I hung up. 3 months after the funeral, my mother showed up at the Veteran Center. It was a Tuesday, 11:30 a.m. I was helping an 80-year-old Korean War vet fill out his hearing aid reimbursement form when the front door opened and my mother walked in wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and an expression like she'd stepped in something. She looked around the small office, the mismatched chairs, the flickering fluorescent light, the bulletin board covered in event flyers, and her mouth tightened. Sarah, we need to talk. The veteran looked between us. I smiled at him. Mr. Patterson, can you give me just a minute? Take your time, young lady. I walked my mother outside. What are you doing here? I'm here because your father and I are concerned. You left a promising military career to work at this. She gestured vaguely at the building. This place for poverty wages. You're living in that depressing apartment on Hawthorne Street. You won't return our calls. Derek says you've blocked him on everything. Derek told me I was playing soldier. I'm not interested in talking to Derek. You're being childish. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. I know you're upset about the house, but Sarah, you have to understand, we had expenses. The funeral, the medical bills, Grandpa had veteran benefits. The VA covered his hospice care. Her face twitched. There were other costs. Like what? That's not your concern. A car pulled into the parking lot. An older man got out, saw us, and waved. I waved back. My mother watched him walk inside. "This is pathetic," she said quietly. "You're throwing your life away out of spite, because you didn't get what you wanted from the will, because you're angry that your grandfather left everything to us instead of you." Something hardened in my chest. I'd felt it happening over the past 3 months, like scar tissue forming over a wound. "Mom, did you ever visit him? In the last year of his life?" "Of course I did." "How many times?" "I don't have to answer?" I checked the hospice sign-in log. Your name appears twice, once in May, for 15 minutes, once in July, for 22 minutes. Dad's name appears once. Derek's name doesn't appear at all. Her face flushed. "We had busy lives, Sarah. Not everyone can drop everything and run across the world every time. I was stationed 7,000 miles away and I visited him more than you did. You live 40 minutes from here." "You make up stories," she said. Her voice was rising. "You always have. You twist things to make yourself the hero and everyone else the villain. Your grandfather was a senile old man who told you fantasy stories about being some kind of war hero, and you believed him because you wanted to feel special. Well, you're not special, Sarah. You're a resentful, ungrateful girl who can't accept that she wasn't the favorite." Mr. Patterson had come back outside. He stood on the steps, watching. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. She was 56 years old, wearing a pantsuit that cost more than my monthly rent, standing in front of a veteran center trash-talking her father to his granddaughter while a Korean War vet listened. "You should go," I said quietly. "Excuse me? I have work to do. You should go." She stared at me, waiting for me to apologize. I'd spent 28 years apologizing. For existing. For asking questions. For wanting proof that Grandpa mattered. I didn't apologize. She left, Mr. Patterson waited until her car disappeared, then looked at me. "That your mother?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Thomas used to talk about his family. Said his son forgot where he came from. Said his daughter-in-law married the money, not the man." He paused. "Said you were the only one worth a damn." I couldn't speak. "Come on," he said. "Let's finish that paperwork." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what my mother had said. "You make up stories." I'd heard it so many times it had become background noise. But now, holding Grandpa's service records, knowing the truth about his classified missions, his Navy Cross recommendations, his 40-year fight to be recognized, now the phrase felt different. Weaponized. I got out of bed at 2:14 a.m. and started going through the boxes I'd grabbed from Grandpa's workshop before the house sold. My parents didn't want them. "Junk," my father had said. "Throw it out." I'd taken them anyway. 8 boxes of junk, old radios, repair manuals, tools. And at the bottom of the 5th box, wrapped in a towel, a small wooden case. Inside, Grandpa's dog tags, a faded photograph of him in SEAL gear, 3 letters from the Navy Historical Foundation, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in his handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Scout, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and your parents have already told you I didn't matter. I knew they would. I've watched them do it for years. Dismiss anything that doesn't fit their version of the story. Do you remember when you were 13 and I showed you that ring? I told you the truth doesn't need an audience. I meant it. I was a SEAL, Sarah. For 3 years I did things I can't talk about and saved men whose names I can't say. When I came home, I tried to be the father your dad needed. I failed. He wanted a father who made money, who played golf, who fit into his wife's country club world. I fixed radios. I wasn't enough. But you, Scout, you were always enough. You asked questions. You wanted proof. You didn't just believe what you were told. The original documentation for my service is with Colonel Patricia Hayes at the Navy Historical Foundation. I've arranged for everything to be released to you. Not because I need you to defend my honor. I'm dead. I don't care about honor anymore. I need you to see the documentation so you know. When someone tells you that you're making up stories, that you're being dramatic, that you're twisting the truth, sometimes, Scout, you're not. Sometimes you're the only one brave enough to look. Inside this case, you'll also find the deed to the house. The real one. I never changed my will to give everything to your father. I changed it 8 years ago to leave the house to you. The document your parents showed the probate court was forged. I knew they'd do it, so I kept the original in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, Box 447. The key is taped to the back of this letter. I also kept records. Every visit, every phone call, every promise they made and broke. Every time you flew 7,000 miles to sit with a dying old man while they couldn't drive 40 minutes. I documented it all. There's also $127,000 in an account at the same bank. I've been saving since you were born. It's yours. For college, for a house, for whatever you need. The account number is written on the back of the deed. Don't let them take this from you, Scout. Not because you need the money, because you need to know that I saw you. I saw every sacrifice you made, every time you showed up when they didn't, every moment you chose truth over comfort. You're not making up stories. You never were. The Navy is hosting a 50th anniversary commemoration for SEAL Team 1 on November 14th at the Fort Benning Ceremony Hall. Colonel Hayes will be there. She'll have the full documentation of my service, including the mission records that were finally declassified. Go. Let them see you. Let them see who I really was. All my love, Grandpa Thomas P.S. The ring I showed you is in the case. Wear it. It belonged to my platoon commander. He gave it to me after the firebase rescue. Said I'd earned it. Show it to the right people, Scout. They'll know. I read the letter 4 times. Then I sat on my apartment floor and cried until my throat was raw. The next morning, I went to First National Bank with my military ID and the key. The safety deposit box contained everything Grandpa had promised, the original deed with my name on it, bank statements showing the $127,000 account, a notarized will dated 8 years ago, and a folder labeled Documentation. Inside the folder, photos of the forged deed my parents had submitted to probate court. Copies of text messages between my father and a lawyer discussing simplified estate transfer. A recording, audio of my mother telling someone on the phone, "Sarah won't fight it. She never does. She'll just accept it and move on like she always does." I sat in that bank vault for 30 minutes, holding evidence of a fraud scheme 8 years in the making. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Ortiz. She specialized in estate fraud and elder abuse. When I showed her the documents, she went very still. "Your parents sold property that legally belonged to you," she said. "They forged a will, filed it with the court, and pocketed $340,000. That's not a civil matter, Ms. Hale. That's criminal." What do I do? We file a lawsuit, we submit the real deed, the real will, and the evidence your grandfather collected. We get the sale reversed, and we press charges for fraud and forgery. She looked at me seriously. "But I need to warn you, this will destroy your relationship with your family." I thought about my mother's voice. "You make up stories." I thought about 28 years of being told my reality wasn't real. "They already destroyed it," I said. The lawsuit was filed on October 23rd. My parents were served on October 24th. My father called me 16 times in 3 hours. I didn't answer. My mother showed up at the Veterans Center on October 25th. This time, there were witnesses, the center director, 2 staff members, and 4 veterans waiting in the lobby. My mother's face was blotchy with anger. "You filed a lawsuit? Against your own parents? You forged Grandpa's will. We did no such thing. That will was legitimate. Your grandfather left everything to us." I pulled out my phone and played the recording. My mother's voice, crystal clear. Sarah won't fight it. She never does. Her face drained of color. You sold my house, I said quietly. You took my inheritance. You dismissed my grandfather as nothing special, while he fought for 40 years to be recognized for saving 8 men's lives in combat. You stood in front of me and told me I make up stories while you were committing fraud. Sarah, I have the original deed. I have the real will. I have bank records, text messages, and recordings. I have documentation of every visit I made versus every visit you didn't. I have everything. She looked around at the watching veterans. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You're going to humiliate us over a house? Over some fantasy about your grandfather being a war hero? You're that spiteful? I'm that done. Your father and I raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me college fund money that went to Derek's car. You gave me birthday dinners where you talked about his achievements. You gave me 28 years of being told I was making things up. I paused. Grandpa gave me the truth. And a key to a safety deposit box. I'll take that. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. She turned and left. One of the veterans, a Vietnam vet named Carl, whistled low. That woman really didn't know Thomas was a SEAL? She didn't want to know, I said. November 14th, the SEAL Team, 150th anniversary commemoration. The ceremony was held at Fort Benning in a hall that held 300 people. Veterans, active duty SEALs, families, and military brass filled the seats. I wore my dress blues and carried the ring Grandpa had left me in my pocket. Colonel Hayes met me outside. Lieutenant Hale, I'm glad you came. Thank you for arranging this, ma'am. Your grandfather deserved recognition 40 years ago. We're trying to correct that today. She handed me a program. You're sitting in the front row, family section. My throat tightened. My parents weren't invited. Your grandfather's instructions were very specific. Only you. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. sharp. A 3-star admiral spoke about the history of SEAL Team 1, the missions they'd run, the men they'd lost. Then he began reading names. Chief Petty Officer Michael Rodriguez, Silver Star recipient. Petty Officer First Class James Chen, Navy Cross recipient. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Hale. I stood. My legs shook. The Admiral continued. Chief Hale ran 17 reconnaissance missions between 1968 and 1971. On April 12, 1970, he held Firebase Zulu against enemy forces for 6 hours while evacuating 8 wounded Marines. He was recommended for the Navy Cross. Due to administrative errors, his commendation was never processed. Today, we honor his service. Applause filled the hall. I couldn't breathe. After the ceremony, veterans approached me, men in their 70s and 80s, wearing SEAL tridents and unit patches. You're Thomas's granddaughter? Yes, sir. He pulled my brother out of that firebase, carried him 200 yards under fire. Your grandfather saved his life. Another man, tears in his eyes. Thomas wrote to me for 30 years, never missed my birthday. I didn't know he'd been fighting to get his records recognized. I thought he just didn't care about the medals. He didn't care about the medals, I said. He cared about the truth. Then a 2-star general approached. He was younger than the other vets, maybe 55, with a chest full of ribbons. Lieutenant Hale? Yes, sir. I'm General Marcus Webb. I command Naval Special Warfare Group 1. He looked at my hand. Is that your ring? I pulled it out. The silver caught the light. His face changed. May I? I handed it to him. He turned it over, read the engraving, and his eyes widened. Where did you get this? My grandfather left it to me, sir. He said it belonged to his platoon commander. Lieutenant Sarah Hale, your grandfather served under my father. Commander Richard Webb, this was his ring. He looked at me. My father died in 1989. I've been looking for this ring for 35 years. We thought it was lost. Your grandfather had it the whole time? He said your father gave it to him after the firebase rescue, said he'd earned it. The general's voice cracked. My father wrote about that mission. He said Thomas Hale was the bravest man he'd ever served with. He wanted him decorated, but the paperwork was lost and my father died before he could fix it. He paused. Your grandfather kept this ring safe for 50 years. I nodded. I couldn't speak. I'd like to buy it back from you, the general said. Name your price. It's not for sale, sir, but I pulled the chain over my head. If you'd like to have it returned to your family, it's yours. He stared at me. You'd just give it to me? My grandfather would want your father's ring to go home. General Webb took the ring with shaking hands. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stood at attention and saluted me. Your grandfather was a hero, Lieutenant, and so are you. The hall had gone silent, 300 people watching, 100 people. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire hall rose in a standing ovation. For Grandpa Thomas. For the truth. For 40 years of fighting to be seen. I stood there in my dress blues, crying, while Vietnam veterans and Navy SEALs and a 2-star general honored a man my parents had called nothing special. The lawsuit took 4 months to resolve. The forged will was thrown out. The real will was accepted. The house sale was reversed. The buyers were compensated. My parents had to return the $340,000 plus legal fees, and the property was transferred to me. My father called once, 3 weeks after the ceremony. Someone had posted video of General Webb saluting me. It had 1.2 million views. Sarah, we need to talk about this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Dad. You committed fraud. You forged Grandpa's will. You sold my house. We were going to give you your share eventually. We just needed to handle some debts first. You told me he was nothing special. You said he was just an old man who fixed radios. You said nobody cared. Silence. Did you watch the video, Dad? The one where a 2-star general saluted him? Where 8 men testified that he saved their lives? Sarah, your mother and I raised you. You deserve exactly what you gave Grandpa. Nothing. I hung up, blocked the number. Derek sent one text. You really are making up stories. That general probably didn't even know him. I sent back the photo of Grandpa in SEAL gear standing next to Commander Webb. He didn't reply. 6 months later, I'm sitting in Grandpa's house, my house, drinking mint tea from his chipped Navy mug. I'm still working at the Veteran Center. I'm also going back to school, using the $127,000 Grandpa saved. Master's degree in military history. The house still smells like motor oil and pine wood. I've kept his workshop exactly as it was. On Thursdays, I volunteer at the Veteran Center, just like he did. Last week, a woman brought in a broken radio. Can you fix it? She asked. My husband's voice is on a recording. It's the only one I have left. I fixed it. Didn't charge her. When she cried listening to her husband's voice, I understood why Grandpa did this work. The truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs one person brave enough to look. If you're watching this and someone in your family has ever told you you make up stories when you know you're telling the truth, type I see you in the comments. Or if you've had to fight to honor someone who is dismissed as unimportant, type I fought. Both are brave. Both are valid. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here.